Nice to see everybody. There it was.
Nice to see everyone. Yes.
All right, it looks like we are up live on YouTube. So what we'll do is we'll call to order the Legislative Audit Commission full committee meeting. It is September 10th, 2021, 9 a.m. So welcome everybody on this beautiful fall day. Today we have a little bit of work. We have an institution who is leaving. Sorry, Mr. Nobles, if I referred to you as an institution, but I may, and as we go through this process. So, but a couple things on the agenda. We have the acknowledgement, Mr. Nobles, his retirement announcement, and then of course all of the actions that will, or all the things we need to do to fill that seat, and the steps necessary. So we have those laid out. I think everybody has received the agenda, the memorandum, worked with Michelle Weber on some of the steps, the proposed steps, and then we've got a couple action items today in addition to lay out to formalize what we're doing is identifying and agreeing on the process, and then discussion on interim director and the process that we can seek a motion to approve that process and move forward. So we have somebody in place while we have a thorough search for a replacement, and then members to be part of that selection team. So that's what our goal is today. So I'll start out, Mr. Nobles and team that only been here for a brief time. I've been around state government for a long time. I think this is going close to my 38th or 39th year. It still would be considered an infancy in Jim Noble years. But my, being a part of this commission, I think is an amazing process, but made easier by Jim and the team and the institution that has been created in the process, and the professionalism. I think is we're lucky to have you. I think the good part is Jim, is that legacies live on, good and bad. And I think we're on a great foundation for us to continue to move forward. I know everybody on this commission, and it's one of the best bipartisan things we do, respects the office and appreciates the work and depend on it heavily for everything that's done. I hope citizens understand as we continue. I think we try to make the update every time we have the meeting is that you really are the body, and your staff there are the eyes and ears of the legislature, and thus meaning the eyes and ears of our citizens to make sure that government's performing and the level and what we expect. And so we would hope that continues. We're confident it will, but I just can't tell you enough, Mr. Nobles, in my experience, my brief experience, how wonderful it is to work with you and your team to make sure that things are done really well. Looking at the historical knowledge is one thing I think we're gonna miss with you, the walking historian that you have become. But I think you've built a great institution and a wonderful team that I think will continue. So I just want to extend my gratitude and for the years of service, and I'm sure every single Minnesotan, whether they know it or not, is grateful to you. So thank you. So we'll go, Senator Tiff Meyer, looks like your hand is up. Anybody else raise your hand if you would like to make a comment? Senator Tiff Meyer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For almost for a long part of my legislative service, I've been on the Legislative Audit Commission. So knowing Mr. Nobles quite well through all of that, whether it's in the House or in the Senate, and my appreciation of that work. And so I just want to personally say thank you, Mr. Nobles, for what you've given to the legislature, your defense of the legislature, your recognition of the legislature as a branch of government, you're upholding that and all that you do. And so sometimes it's so easy for us to, you kind of get comfortable, get used to this, but it is the legislative auditor. And you have been that for us. You have been the legislative auditor, and your loyalty to that is not unnoticed, and it is also very much appreciated. And Mr. Chair, I would also like to say I'd like to have us as a commission make a motion of appreciation and recognition of Mr. Nobles' work through all of his career with the Minnesota legislature. And I'm not quite sure if I just say that and then we vote on it, or if it's something that should be more formally written. I will yield to the thoughts of the rest of my members of the commission, but I think it'd be really important for us to have an official recognition from us.
Thank you, Senator Tiff Meyer. And I'm not sure what that motion or that action would look like. Looks like Representative Hansen also would like to add some additional comment. Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think it would be good to have an actual motion on this, and we could direct staff to write that. I know Representative Erickson has done a House resolution. I'm assuming there'll probably be a Senate resolution, but I think it'd be good from the commission to have something, and rather than having it written on the fly here, we would want to make sure we have the appropriate praise for Mr. Nobles, and all the spelling would be correct and everything. So I think if we directed staff, and I don't know who that staff would be, maybe that's Senator Cran's staff and nonpartisan House and Senate research, but I would support Senator Tiff Meyer's motion.
Thank you, Representative Hansen. I agree, and if we can identify the staff who can assist with that, to formally recognize as an act of the
Mr. Chair,
Audit Commission. Yes, who is that?
That was Senator Tiff Meyer.
Oh, sorry, Senator Tiff Meyer. I couldn't see what the highlight. Senator Tiff Meyer, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think the motion might be something that we would encourage our House and Senate members to draft with the assistance of the LCC staff, to have a House and Senate resolution. And they don't have to be joint. That can be quite complicated, but that we direct that be done on behalf of Mr. Nobles. And that might take care of us speaking from the Legislative Audit Commission, and then the members of the House and the members of the Senate on this commission can go further and do the actual House and Senate resolutions.
Thanks, Senator Tiff Meyer. Yes, I think those were, as Representative Hansen said, Senator Erickson or Representative Erickson is moving that forward, and we are moving that forward on our side as well. So I think collectively we'll make sure that those actions are taking place to formally acknowledge the great work that the office has done.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Excellent. Anybody else? Any comments? I don't see any. Oh, there's Representative Bernardi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to also thank Jim Nobles for his service. And I also want to recognize the legacy he leaves behind with the great team that he's developed and the institutions he's made and the great staff he has. And so I want to thank him for that and leaving that legacy with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Bernardi. Senator Friends.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I enjoy serving on LSC, but if this is our moment to say thank you, I just want to extend my appreciation. Mr. Nobles, you have been fantastic, and words probably aren't enough to describe all the work you've done for the state, especially since I wasn't on LAC when you did much of it. But this is one North Mankato senator saying, we will not forget the work you've done. We wish you the best as you go forward. And thanks for all the things that you've done to help keep state government in line, under proper scrutiny, and do good things for the people.
Thank you.
Senator Friends. Senator Rust.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I've told Jim Nobles many times how much I have appreciated his work. I've been on the Legislative Audit Commission not as long as he's been the legislative auditor, but I think longer than almost anyone else, serving 5 times as the chair. And it is, quite frankly, it has not always been an easy road. We have had challenges that at some points were leading the executive of the state with plans almost to disband the office because it was we were in such partisan controversies in the state, and that caused us under Governor Carlson to totally reform the way in which the LAC operates, its membership, the timing of the release of reports, et cetera. And I think we came out so much stronger on the other side, so that I think no one would deny that we are in, we have a lot of partisan divide in the country right now. We have it in the legislature, but it has not touched the Legislative Audit Commission, even though we all hold very strong partisan views outside of this body. And I congratulate those who have served as the chairs, and Senator Curran, who's had opportunities within his party, and he's still with us. And Senator Curran, we appreciate your work and your even temper on this commission, as well as your ability to work with all of us. And I think the audit staff is superb, including our 2 deputy auditors, Ms. Randall and Ms. Eisen. It's a privilege to work with them as well, and it reflects on Jim Nobles' ability to hire the best and to keep our confidence in his work because of their work. I consider, I don't know if it's proper, but I consider Jim Nobles a friend, which does not mean, as he knows, that I don't object and or even quibble about some of the reports that have come out of his office. Sometimes I just think they're plain wrong. And then other times, of course, I'm a cheerleader for them. And I think we all find ourselves in that position. And that's one of the strengths of that office. And I certainly will miss him. And but I also want to continue my service here, because our work is ongoing. And I love being most people wouldn't, I guess, but I love being the chair of the financial audit subcommittee, because I believe that deputy auditor license work is maybe not front and center all the time, but it's what keeps our state agencies on their toes, knowing that their work is going to undergo an intense financial audit on a periodic basis. And that comes from the also the leadership of Jim Nobles in making sure that that division is as strong as the program evaluation division, which generally gets more into the public eye. So I add my my gratitude and certainly my congratulations to a job well done, my dear friend Jeff.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Sen Rust. And I don't see any other hands. And so, Mr. Nobles, I'd love to give you a few minutes if you could just cover, in great detail every single audit you've been a part of
Yeah.
since the beginning. Well, so we would, Jim, if we allow you some time, please accept the gratitude that everybody has provided here, even those spoken and unspoken. So thank you.
And thank you. Thank you for all the kind comments and all the support over the years. Senator Cran, I want to pick up on your reference to me being the institution. And as I think you will accept, it is the office, really, that is the institution. I just filled one of the seats here. And I have to say, too, in response to some of Senator Rest's comments, you, the commission, are a very vital part of the institution as well. I have often reflected on the fact that, and part of this came from my history of when I came to work for the legislature, is that the legislature is a very partisan place. But I came to the legislature at the right time when there were legislative leaders, bipartisan, who said, we are going to strengthen the legislative branch by having not only partisan staff, which you absolutely need, but we're going to have some nonpartisan staff. We're going to have organizations like the Revisor's Office and budget analysts, and we're going to have all these other people. I think it's really important that everybody acknowledge that this doesn't happen without the political support of the elected representatives. So you are very much the bedrock foundation on which we build our work. We don't exist without you. And without your, and I might say sufferance at times of stepping on your toes with some of our reports, as Senator Rest has mentioned. And so the fact that you allow us to do that work in a nonpartisan way is a real tribute to this legislature. I know the public just thinks you all disagree all the time about everything, but you don't. You come together on fundamental principles. And I want to pick up on Senator Tiff Meyer's point, because that's been one of the really important principles for me over the years, and that's separation of powers. James Madison had a lot to do with writing the Constitution of this country, and we model a lot of state constitutions after that. And Madison was a little offended when people said, well, we need these 10 amendments to the Constitution called the Bill of Rights, because he said, I think what I did was sufficient. And what he pointed to was separation of powers. He said separation of powers is really what will protect this democracy. As long as we have each branch with their duties, but checking and overseeing each other, we will be stronger. And I think that's proven true in many ways, but it's also why you created this Office of the Legislative Auditor, to strengthen your function of oversight of the other two branches of government. And that's one of the reasons I've really stuck with this, because it has given me an opportunity to participate in democracy without doing what you do, which always scared me to death. And that is go out there and run for office. And I have known so many of you and many others in the past. And I've never been out on the campaign trail with any of you. And I think I wasn't supposed to. But I've gotten a hint of what you go through to get elected. And I know it's an enormous sacrifice for you to serve. And then I've often told new members when we do orientation for new members, oh, you've sacrificed so much to get elected. Now, guess what? you won the prize, and now you're going to sacrifice a whole lot more of your time, time with your families, time with a lot of things, with your businesses. So I come away from 49 years of serving in the legislature as a nonpartisan staff person with great, great respect for the political system and for you as people who go out and get elected and stand for election. And that is the fundamental way in which we get accountability. Now, to end, I will just mention one other thing and refer back to James Madison, because he also said that elections are the most important thing that we have in democracy to ensure accountability, but we also need a few other mechanisms and separation of powers. But I've often thought OLA is also one of those mechanisms of accountability. And again, you, the legislature, not only those sitting in these chairs, but over the years, you've recognized that. And I think probably, if I can just make a personal note, probably the most wonderful thing for me is that 49, 50 years ago, I was working as a very, very young intern at House Research. And then they gave me a job to stay on in staffing the Government Operations Committee. And I got a call one time from the Speaker's office. Come down, we want to talk to you about an idea. And the idea was creating a legislative audit office. And the Speaker and some of the staff and legislators from both parties were there, and they said, hey, Knowles, why don't you work on this for us? Draft something up. And so having been there at the beginning and understanding what they wanted, and now having had the opportunity to serve in that office over these many years, I would hope that those who have passed on, one of them, Martin Sabo, for example, who was Speaker at the time, but many others, I hope they're looking down and they too are saying, job well done. Because I have often felt like I carried a responsibility to fulfill not only your expectations, but the expectations of many who came before you and created this office. And so I owe a great debt of thanks to so many people that I cannot even begin to name them. But I will just say to all of you, thank you. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Mr. Nobles. I think the key, part of the institution is, we talk about there's a partisan role. We all have to get elected, and that is, and that's what I think dominates the headlines. But I think this institution has proven we can govern, and when it's the best interest of the states, we do govern, and we all do get, we do come together and govern, and so I think that's an important point, and appreciate you being a part of it from its infancy. And now we will continue to carry on and make sure that it continues to serve in the purpose it was intended. Sen Rust, give a little history about the evolution of it, and where we're at today. I think we're in a very good spot. And so thank you, Mr. Nobles, for playing a key role in that from the very beginning and through its evolution. So thank you. Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Jim, I just want to personally thank you and add one additional thing to the discussion. And that is your recognition, the recognition of your peers, and as a representative of Minnesota, not in an elected position, but as quality around the country. So when I go to NCSL or CSG meetings, around the country, our peers and other legislatures and staffs around the country recognize and value your work and the work of the office. And you represent Minnesota in that way. And that is that high quality material and the years of expertise in, I think other states have even modeled their offices on what we've done over those 50 years since you were at the inception of the office. So I can't stress that enough of you represent and have represented us well around the country. And I think even the federal government recognizes that work. Those audit reports are shared. I know that they are award-winning at times over the years. And that's something that I think all of us, it makes us proud that you represent us well there. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Representative Hansen. So with that, what I'd like to do is, it's no more hands. I've worked with Ms. Weber and Michelle. We've put together an outline, kind of what the process looks like. And so what I'd like to do at this point, have Ms. Weber kind of walk through that process. And then what we'll be doing after, we'll have a little discussion. If everybody's good, we'll have a motion to approve the suggested process, and we'll continue on to the next step. So Ms. Weber?
Mr. Chair and members, I'm Michelle Weber with the Legislative Coordinating Commission, and I'm available to assist you as you embark on the important work of appointing a new legislative auditor. Included in the meeting materials were 3 documents. The first is a memo from me outlining the proposed recruitment and appointment process, which I'll walk through with all of you today. The second is a draft position description for the legislative auditor that I'll continue to work with Jim Nobles over the next several days to finalize, to ensure that it reflects the entirety of the work of the legislative auditor. And then the final document that was included in the meeting materials is a draft position announcement, which we're hoping to get posted next week. As I worked to put these materials together, I solicited input from Mr. Nobles and members of the OLA management team, as well as House Research and Senate Council Research and Fiscal Analysis. The recruitment and appointment process memo includes a reference to the statute that governs the appointment of the legislative auditor, a timeline for the recruitment and appointment process, an overview of where the position will be posted, and outreach that is planned, as well as a multi-phased screening and interview process for your consideration. The appointment of the legislative auditor is governed under Minnesota Statutes 3.971, Subdivision 1. The auditor is appointed by the Audit Commission for a 6-year term, as you're all well aware. And to preserve the independence of the auditor, they may not be removed from the position except for cause after a public hearing occurs. The anticipated timeline for filling this vacancy would begin with the posting sometime next week, with a closing date for applications of October 11th. There's a multi-phased screening and interview process that's outlined within the timeline, if you're looking at the first page of the memo, with an anticipation that the new legislative auditor would be appointed by the commission around November 9th or 10th. I'd like to note for all of you that this timeline reflects a best case scenario. It assumes that scheduling of interviews goes well, that the process plays out as proposed within the memo. It doesn't account for scheduling challenges that may arise or other anticipated circumstances. So I think in a best case scenario, we would be looking at the November 9th, 10th timeline for the potential appointment of the next legislative auditor. Also, with Mr. Noble's announcement of his retirement being effective on October 6th, an acting or interim legislative auditor would need to be appointed for a 1 to 2 month time period. The process for consideration today by all of you would permit the chair and vice chair of the Audit Commission to work with me on the appointment of an acting or interim auditor. Now moving on to the second page of the memo, the notice of the position would be widely distributed to state and local government entities, national associations, hiring and recruitment sites that people are mostly familiar with, Indeed, things of that nature, and through other forums that have recently been used to recruit nonpartisan director positions. While the retirement of Mr. Nobles is very, very significant from the perspective of the OLA, there have been over the last 5 years other examples of nonpartisan joint offices. And so this process before you today builds upon the processes that were used for those other director positions. We'll also be reaching out to NCSL, the National Association of State Auditors, Comptrollers, and Treasurers, as well as doing broad email distribution of the position that is available.
The proposed screening and appointment process includes 3 phases. The first would be a resume review of candidates and first round interviews that would be conducted by nonpartisan LCC House and Senate staff. Candidates recommended to advance by that group would receive a review for partisan history and/or activities prior to advancing to the next phase of the process. The second phase would include a round of private interviews that would be held in private by a 4-member panel of the Legislative Audit Commission. This panel would include representation from the House and the Senate, with a member representing the majority and minority of each of the bodies. That panel would be making recommendations then of finalists that would be advanced to the executive subcommittee for consideration. Prior to advancement to the executive subcommittee, reference checks would be conducted, as well as a criminal background study. The next phase then would leverage the executive subcommittee, and that would be conducted in public. So there would be a public meeting of the executive subcommittee to interview the finalists that were recommended by that 4-panel members of the Audit Commission. The subcommittee would then make a recommendation to the full Audit Commission on the appointment of an individual to serve as the next legislative auditor. So that concludes my presentation and overview of the process. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Weber. Any members, any questions? Sen Rest?
Thank you. I think this is a great process, and thank you for being so thorough about it. At some point, that 4-member panel of the LAC, I wonder how, Mr. Chairman, we're thinking of that being constituted. And I just have a suggestion as it gets to that point, that since the executive committee is will hold a public hearing about that. I just wonder if maybe the 4-member panel should be 4 people who are not on the executive committee, that interview group, so that they're anyway. I just think a broader group, rather than just using the executive committee to do the interviewing and then making the recommendation, and then the executive committee sitting and having a hearing on that recommendation. And I know that there's no procedure for naming those people, but I think that would be a really good and fair way to proceed, and would recommend that when we get to that point, that those 4 members, for example, be other than yourself, Representative Hansen, me, and I think it's Senator Tiff Meyer. No. Who's the other member of the executive committee?
I am.
Sen Rust. You're correct.
Who are the 4 members? Who are the members of the executive committee? Could you say those again?
Yep. Sen Rest, you were correct. Senator Tiff Meyer was the other member.
Okay, so that the interviewers be maybe other than the 4 of us that you just named, and because it's still balanced, Democrat and Republican, House and Senate. Just a suggestion. Maybe you do want the executive committee being those 4 people, being the interviewers, but I think we can be more expansive in that. That's all, and include more people in that with different experiences of the legislative auditor's office, just a thought that came as Ms. Weber was describing the process. I welcome other people's reactions to that part of it, and what the process would be for naming those 4 people who would be the interview committee. So, I think it's going to be a time-consuming job, quite frankly, but I just wonder what other people think.
Thank you, Sen Rust. I had similar thoughts as well to have a broad perspective of participation in the hiring process, and I think your suggestion is a good one. So I think the hands as they went up, I think Representative Liebling, your hand was up first. Representative Liebling?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So I also think that it's good to maybe rethink that. Thank you, Senator Rest, for that. And I also want to acknowledge that Senator Tiff Meyer had put in the chat that she was wondering if the document could be shared on screen. I printed it out and have it in front of me, but I think that's a good suggestion if we could do that, Ms. Weber. Much as I actually prefer looking at the faces on screen, I think it's helpful for folks to have that. But my comment on this, and it is very helpful to have this, thank you, Ms. Weber, for that, kind of goes along with what Senator Rest was saying. As I look at this, the phase 3, where the executive subcommittee holds a public meeting and considers finalists, advance the recommendation, I frankly would prefer to have that be the whole commission. I don't really see the value that's gained in, at that point, having a smaller number, because one of the big issues here, besides I think there is definitely a time commitment that Senator Rest was referring to, but the ultimate important value here, I think, is that there has to be a lot of buy-in. The person who's ultimately selected needs to have full legitimacy and full support. And I think that having, for that to really be there, I think it's important for more members of this commission, which is already a very small subset of the legislature, to be involved in this process. And so I would just suggest that phase 3, rather than having a public meeting of the executive subcommittee, that just be a full LAC meeting to get to, and we could even do it in 2 phases, get to finalists there, and then, meet again for picking the finalist or announcing the finalist. But I just think that would be better than having a really, really small number of people at that point. So that was my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Liebling. Representative Hansen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have 2 questions. One is, since Mr. Nobles is leaving in midterm, is the appointment for the remainder of the term, or is the appointment for a 6-year term? I'd like to get that on the record. And then I have a follow-up question.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Excellent question, Representative Hansen. Ms.
Um,
Weber?
And Mr. Chair, the appointment that the LAC that the Legislative Audit Commission makes would be for a new full 6-year term.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Ms. Weber. I wanted to get that on the record. And then secondly, we have the process for the annual performance reviews for the deputy auditors. And their anniversary date is around that November time as well. So will Mr. Nobles, will you be conducting the deputy auditor performance reviews as we've set out in the last performance review process?
Thank you,
Mr. Chair.
Representative Hansen. Mr. Nobles?
Representative Hansen, I certainly can do that, and will commit to do that. So you will have that available to you.
Thank you, Mr. Nobles. Representative Hansen, any follow-up?
Mr. Chair, thank you. I think that's important because I think, that as we go to these anniversary dates, and particularly when there will be the vacancy with an interim, having that completed for the past year's performance is important.
Thank you, Representative Hansen. Senator Tiff Meyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In regards to Senator Rest's comment and also Representative Liebling, I think involving more of the other commission members than the executive committee is very appropriate. The one thing that I would mention, though, is Senator Rest has a lot of experience in history, and basically that would take her out of that process of those interviews, which I think would be missed as far as having her participate in that. The same thing with Representative Hanson and myself. Senator Gran, you're a little bit newer, but sometimes the advantage of having served through all those things does have a different kind of contribution. And I value new members of the commission also being able, because they look at it with a fresh outlook sometimes that I think is very, very valuable. And so a mix of that is very important. And so that's kind of how I share my concern. When you take away all four members of the executive committee, you kind of affect the interviewees, and you take away some of that longer term of experience, which I think would not be a good thing. I think we need that balance and that kind of approach. So sometimes you can form instead of using the executive committee, just have a separate group. I think what you said, Senator Rest, is really important. It is a time commitment. It really, really is. Having been part of not too long ago, the evaluation for Mr. Nobles himself and going through all of that, it's a time commitment. And I'm glad to do that. I think we all are. We're very committed to that. But sometimes I think when you narrow it down to four, but it doesn't have to be the executive committee, it can be maintaining the bipartisan, bicameral approach, but maybe keeping some of the newer and an experienced person, kind of that mix, so that we have the benefit of that, those kind of approaches. I do think that the full LAC in that, I think it was the one where we interview more the final candidates or something like that. I think the full LAC, having everybody being involved in that, I think that is a good idea. But I think the other more upfront work is where I just think having that mix would be good. And we could actually have the chair and the vice chair appoint those. They could each appoint two. Majority party, minority party from the House, the same thing from the Senate, keeping in mind that sense of someone with a longer history and experience and someone with coming in with a newer perspective. But that might be a way of getting to that, involving others, but it could be a mix. So those are just my comments in regards to this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Tiff Meyer. Sen Rust.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Tiff Meyer, for your confidence in my experience. And I certainly, I certainly think that should be part of it as well, because the executive committee, has just been pointed out to me, does not have on it a member of the Republican members from the House. You know, that is not the executive. I mean, the executive committee is three senators, two of the same party, and Representative Hanson and myself, and I would think having something like on the interviewing committee, which I would be delighted to be part of, quite frankly, and would commit the time. But maybe we could, instead of having Representative Hansen and Senator Coran appoint them, maybe the three members of the Senate from the DFL, they will decide let them decide who will be their representative. And I would make a case for myself, quite frankly, but maybe we would come to a different decision. The 3 members of the Republicans from the House would choose their person to be, a person from them to do it, and the same thing for the Democrats. That would include Representative Liebling and Representative Hansen and Representative Bernardi, and then from the Republicans in the Senate the same way. And it may be that you would be chosen, or Senator Coran, or Senator Benson. But I think we might find greater satisfaction in that process if the person who was on the interview committee had the confidence of the other 2 members of their own party in that group. Maybe not, but that would be, we certainly, I would lean more to having the full audit commission as well, making that recommendation, if only because the executive committee has no member of the House GOP on it. And I don't think that's right. That's
Thank you.
2 cents.
Thank you, Sen Rust. I think based on the conversation so far, I think the consensus of having the full committee for the final interviews and of course the final selection appears to be a favorable modifications from the proposal. And then Senator Rest, your most recent proposal of each of the bodies for equal participation, each selects their own member, I think is a great suggestion, a well-defined process. So with that, I think Representative Erickson, I thought I saw you raising your hand. Did you have a comment?
Thank you, Senator Coran. I think these comments are well made. Are we going to expect Ms. Weber then to revise the proposed applicant screening and appointment process with a vote, after we vote today? Or, what is our process going to be going forward with these ideas that have now come forward? Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Erickson. I think what we'll do is we were looking to make a motion to adopt the defined process, and I think we will adopt that process with the revisions or the modifications which we agree upon, which we're just speaking about for the composition of the down select 4-member team, and then for the final interview, the inclusion of the LAC or whatever we decide on for that with those changes. So, Representative Liebling, I see your hand up.
Yes, thank you. And yeah, I think sounds like a really good way to proceed. The reason I raised my hand again is I want to bring up a related but slightly different issue. And so I was going to bring this up with regard to another document, but it also has impact on this document. And that is, I think we should really talk about the role of partisan activity for a candidate. And what I mean is the proposed posting says a nonpartisan background is essential. And I'm concerned that in the world we live in, that finding people with a nonpartisan background is going to be very, very limiting. And I don't think that's really what we're looking for. I think what we're looking for is someone who can be trusted and have everyone's confidence as a nonpartisan actor. And I think it'll be difficult to find someone who's never done any partisan thing in their life. And so I'm a little bit concerned that may not impact this document we're talking about a lot, but it does have this, this line just above where it says phase 2, where it says the LCC will work with nonpartisan House and Senate offices to conduct a review of candidates for partisan history and activities. Now, I think it's fine to know what those are. I have no problem with that. We definitely should know and understand what those are. But ultimately, I think what we're looking for is someone who can step into the role and that all of us can have confidence that they are acting in a nonpartisan way. Not that they are a person who stepped off of Mars and never had a single partisan thought or activity in their life. I just don't want us to narrow this so much from the outset. So I just wanted to put that on the table. Maybe it doesn't really have to be dealt with in this document, but I just wanted to bring that to the fore here so that we could make sure we deal with it as we move along. So thanks, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you, Representative Liebling. And I think we have Representative Quam next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And all of the discussion about having balance and et cetera, I'm fine with when we having more people in the interview process if each of the 4 sub caucuses, so to speak, had a vote. So in other words, both parties of both chambers would have 1 vote each. But you could have, it happens that maybe 2 people are part of the interview process from the same group. They still would have 1 vote. And I think that might allow for greater participation, plus the possibility that maybe not everyone made every interview or, I'm just thinking that way we can have the fairness, but still allow some greater participation on the partisan, nonpartisan question Representative Liebling brought up. I'm fine with going through and getting the information. And then when we narrow down the candidates, we can make a determination about impartiality. But I would like to start out with that language still present that we're looking for a nonpartisan. I think that keeps the spirit that Mr. Nobles has maintained for the organization intact, and we can see what the candidates look like, and if we deviate, but start the path out with that intact. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Quam. Senator Tiff Meyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's really important to keep the nonpartisan in there. I think there are those creatures out there. They are like Mr. Nobles. They have this deep respect for the system and the process and all of those things, and they are incredibly valuable to us. And we have many of them in our nonpartisan staff anyway. And I think keeping that in there, if there's an issue with it, I think we can adjust it later. But I certainly don't want to give that up to start with. And I have a strong belief that there are those, plenty of them out there, who are of this unique quality, especially in the auditing world. I think they have that a little bit more strongly. And so I'd like to just speak in favor of keeping that nonpartisan.
Thank you, Senator Tiff Meyer. Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So to get things moving, I think it'd be good to separate out the issues, and I would move adoption of the recommendations in the memorandum dated September 9th, 2021 from Michelle Weber that provides the timeline with the adjustment that the phase 3, that there would be a 4-member hiring team, 1 selected from each of the parties and houses of the legislature. So as Senator Rust mentioned, maybe myself, Representative Liebling, and Representative Bernardi get together and say who wants to be on that. And then, so there's 1 representing each of the caucuses and the houses, and that the full commission takes that recommendation and does that hiring. So that last step is with the full commission. So that would be my motion, and I think we could deal with the position description maybe in another motion.
Representative Hansen, I think you referred to the 4-member pre-selection as phase 3. Did you mean phase 1?
phase one tied with phase three. So the phase one is the 4-member, and then the phase three is the full commission.
Representative Hansen's motion is to accept the recommendation from Ms. Weber with the modification of phase one that we go through for the selection of the members in that 4-member down select team, that they would reflect 1 member from each of the caucuses to be selected within the caucus. And then phase three, the whole Legislative Audit Commission would be involved in the interview process, and then of course the final selection.
Mr. Chairman, I think he
did I
actually
restate that
means
accurately?
phase two, not phase three. Phase two is the LAC member interviews and the 4-member panel, not phase one. Right?
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Weber.
Yeah, I believe as I've heard the conversation on page 2 of the memo, under phase 2, the 4 panel members of the Legislative Audit Commission representing each of the caucuses and each of the bodies would be selected by the caucus in each body, who the individual would be that would serve on that panel. And then for phase 3, rather than an executive subcommittee meeting, there would be a full Legislative Audit Commission meeting to conduct public interviews of the finalists that are recommended by that panel.
Mr. Chair, that is my intent in my motion.
Thank you, Representative Hansen. Thank you, Ms. Weber. Any comments and questions? Representative Rest, or I'm sorry, Senator Rest.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that's a good way to proceed. The only thing I just wonder about is if it would be helpful to have a slightly larger interview committee, maybe 2 others, maybe one, quite frankly, one from the majority party in the Senate and the other from majority party in the House. It would still be an equal number, 3 and 3. Be 6 people instead of 4. Or on the other hand, the downside of that is it's much harder to coordinate 6 people's schedules than it is 4. And we're assuming that there'll be not only time commitment for the interviews, but time commitment to prepare for the interviews. So although I think that would be in a way a better way, but I'm going to support the motion, and I would also add my support to Senator Tiff Meyer comments about we really be intentional about finding and recommending people with strong nonpartisan backgrounds. Similar commissions across the country have identical requirements for the person that is in that position of legislative auditor, and the one that comes to mind is the one I'm most familiar with, which is JLARC, which is the similar legislative commission and auditor in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And I think that it's not that there aren't very talented attorney CPAs that can do those kind of audits, but I would not be interested myself in someone that comes from a firm, for example, that routinely represents members of the Democratic Farmer Labor Party in court, that represents the party in disputes, or and in particular, a person that does that, even if they have excellent qualifications otherwise. I agree with Senator Tiff Meyer that there are plenty of people out there who have pursued a nonpartisan profile and history, especially so that they can be of value in not only in government, but also in nonpartisan public service organizations that also prize nonpartisan involvement. So that's my 2 cents on that, but I do believe that the motion from Representative Hansen is a good one, and I appreciate his support of my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you, Sen Rust. And Sen Rust, I think we all, you would like larger participation in the the pre selection, or the initial interview process. And I kind of like a tidbit that Representative Quam put in there. We select 4 members as we've defined. Let the caucuses pick each of the members. But would anybody be opposed to having an alternate member for each if they're willing to participate? And again, it's the obligation of the primary member that we select, but the alternate member could also could participate and garner that additional support for those that want to provide, but then you only get 1 vote per caucus, which would maintain the partisanship representation across the board.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that as an amendment to Representative Hansen's motion that reflects what you just said, so that there could be as many 8 people there, but only 1 vote per caucus, and it's the primary responsibility of the member voting, if you will, to attend everything. But perhaps it's good experience for others as well. So, and they would not have the amount of responsibility that the primary member would have, but it would be very helpful, I think, to have
Mr. Chair, I would incorporate the alternate amendment, the Rest amendment, for having an alternate designated. I think that's important because sometimes people get sick, and we need to be able to get this done in a timely manner, and we need to get moving. So I would incorporate that amendment into my motion.
Excellent. Thank you, Representative Hansen. And Representative Erickson has her hand up. Representative Erickson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would just want Michelle Weber to read the motion as it has been amended, so we can all be apprised of exactly what the wording is, so that we all know what we're voting on. And the other comment I wanted to make is in regard to phase 1. We've been talking about nonpartisan, but it would be the 4th statement made under phase 1 that prior to advancement of candidates to 2nd round interviews, the LCC will work with nonpartisan House and Senate offices to conduct a review of candidates for partisan history activities. So I think it's been covered there very well in that phase 1 process. So I don't think we need to be that concerned about this issue with partisan, because it will be reviewed, I think, thoroughly by LCC and nonpartisan in the House and Senate offices.
Excellent. Thank you, Representative Erickson. And so I think we ultimately came out with a great solution proposed in the amendment as it stands. So Ms. Weber, could you reread the motion and as amended, and so we can take a vote?
Sure, Mr. Chair. So on page 2 of the memo, and please let me know if you'd like me to share my screen. On phase 2, there would be a sentence added at the end that indicates that the members will be selected by each of the caucuses in each of the bodies, and each caucus may also identify an alternative to serve on the panel. For phase 3, executive subcommittee would be removed. Oh, I'm sorry.
Ms. Weber, I think the caveat to that, I think the final is only 1 vote will be do we need to clarify only one vote
Sure.
will be
Yep.
per
Okay, yep.
caucus?
Yes, we can add that as well, that each caucus will be permitted one vote as part of the panel. And then for phase 3, executive subcommittee consideration would be removed, and it would be
Recording in progress.
Where Congress is also
changing it
using the
to
budget
the
reconciliation.
full Legislative Audit Commission. Will hold a public, the full Legislative Audit Commission will hold a public meeting to consider finalists and determine a recommendation for appointment by the full Legislative Audit Commission.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Weber. Any questions? Well, with that, Representative Hansen's motion has been restated by Ms. Weber with the amendments. All those in favor say aye. Raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Mr. Chair, I think you
Aye.
actually need a
Opposed?
roll call. I think you actually need a roll call on virtual.
Thank you, Representative Hansen. So may we have a roll call?
Senator Coran,
Yes.
Senator Benson. She had to leave, I believe. Representative Bernardi,
Yes.
Representative Erickson,
Aye.
Senator Frentz. He had to step away. Representative Hansen,
Yes.
Senator Tiff Meyer,
Aye.
Senator Klein,
Aye.
Representative Liebling,
Aye.
Representative Pearson, Representative Quam, Representative Quam, Senator Rest.
Yes.
That ends the roll. With all ayes, one.
And thank you, Ms. Glidden. So that motion carries. And when we looked at through our work, we were going to approve the overall process, which we've done. We were going to take a motion, separate motions, to define the process. We just wrapped it up in identifying our members. So the only outstanding activity we have as a part of the proposal is then to a motion that approves the executive director of the LCC and to work with the chair and the vice chair of the Legislative Audit Commission to appoint an interim director. Did we cover that, Ms. Weber? I think we have to take that motion.
Mr. Chair, yes, it would be good to have the Audit Commission on record. It was included in the process memo that's what would occur in the timeline, but I think it's important for the full Audit Commission to consider that.
Thank you, Ms. Weber. And I think with that, what we would do is seek, Representative Hansen and I will work with the Ms. Weber and the LCC to find a member, somebody within the existing legislative audit operations who is not seeking that position for the interim. I believe everything's in place, but I think it'd be good it may take a couple months, may take a month, may take a couple months to have a final hire put in place. So we would seek that if somebody has any comments or concerns or would like to make that motion, so we can finish up our business today. No comments, no concerns. Would somebody like to make that motion?
I make that motion.
Representative. Thank you, Sen Rust. Sen Rust makes that motion that we approve the executive director of the LCC working with the chair and the vice chair of the Legislative Audit Commission to appoint an interim auditor. Ms. Glib, can we take a roll call on that?
Senator Coran,
Yes.
Senator Benson, Representative Bernardi,
Aye.
Representative Erickson,
Aye.
Senator Frentz, Representative Hansen,
Aye.
Senator Tiff Meyer,
Aye.
Senator Klein,
Aye.
Representative Liebling,
Aye.
Representative Pearson, Representative Quam, Senator Rest.
Aye.
Ayes have it with 8, and this ends the roll.
Thank you, Ms. Glib. So with that, our motion carries. And with that, I think we have completed all of our actions. We've created, I think, what is a clear path. Great work, everybody. I think we came up with a great process. So we have inclusion for all those that want to participate and a very well-defined process to be able to replace and to fill, never, I'm sorry, Mr. Nobles, never replace, to fill the position that you're vacating. And so we appreciate everybody's participation. I do still see, I think Representative Liebling, you put your hand up. Representative Liebling?
Yes, I did, Mr. Chair. Thank you. And I don't know then if we need to approve the description that has been offered here, the job description. You know, I want to just return to this issue about nonpartisanship. We're not in disagreement about this. We need somebody who is nonpartisan. There is no question about that. My only concern is the way this is worded on the job description. It says a nonpartisan background is essential. So that I don't know if we're going to get a flood of applicants or very few applicants. But one thing I know is that it would be better to have the funnel be bigger in the beginning, and then we, through the process that was just laid out, can screen out anyone who appears to have too much partisanship in their background that we wouldn't have confidence in them. So I think we're all saying the same thing. It's just really, to me, a matter of how much we want to scare people away with the idea that if you've ever done anything partisan in your life, that you should not apply. So I don't think we're voting on this today, but I would just highly suggest that we change that language in the job description. And it could say, right now, there's a separate line that says a nonpartisan background is essential. I would just take that out, change the previous sentence so that it says ability to maintain confidentiality and adhere to a high level of accuracy and nonpartisanship is essential. And then we as a body can screen out and will screen out anyone who we feel has so much background in one way or another that we won't have confidence in them. So that is just the point I wanted to make here. I hope that we can put out the job description, otherwise looks just terrific to me. And I just think we would be better served by not blocking people right away. If they did something 20 years ago for 5 minutes, you know, we want them to still apply so that we can make the determination and not have people self-select out for a reason that may not be a valid one to us. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Liebling. Before I go, Representative Hansen, your hand's up. Representative Erickson, did you have a question, or is your hand just still up from the previous question?
No, I'm sorry. I'll take my hand down.
Thank you. Representative Hansen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Having a little trouble getting the mute off there. I have a question for Mr. Nobles on this particular question of partisanship. And I think he said that he worked for partisan, he was a committee administrator. So therefore he was a partisan staffer when he was, was you a committee administrator, or were you a nonpartisan research staff person?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Nobles.
Representative Hansen, my first job in the legislature was as a researcher at House Research. So I was and expected to be nonpartisan. So no, and I had never participated in any kind of political activity other than voting. If I might just comment on this, I know we have run out of time, but I think all of you are making good points about this. I reflect on the fact that one previous legislative auditor, and yes, there have been previous legislative auditors, just so everybody's clear about that, came from South Dakota, as I recall, where to vote, you had to register, or you did register, and he had registered as a Republican. And that came up over and over again once it was discovered. I worked with him. He did not have a partisan bent or anything. I think what you're getting at is that people have not actively participated in partisan activities. You know, they haven't run for office, they haven't attended caucuses, they haven't managed campaigns, all of those kinds of things. On the other hand, I will tell you that there have been many people over the years who have disagreed with an audit or an evaluation, who have tried to figure out what is Nobles. Is there anything in his background that indicates that maybe he is a Democrat or Republican, and that's why he issued this really biased report, which I don't like. And I'm a Democrat, and so he must be a Republican or vice versa. So I just caution you that, you know, Representative Liebling makes a good point, but we live in a world where any little indication that you are partisan in any way, as I've often said to people, I have asked my wife, and she has agreed, not to put a bumper sticker on her car. It's her car, but if I drive it and one of you sees that bumper sticker, you're going to lose confidence in my nonpartisanship. So there is reality and there is perception. I will leave this to you, folks, members of the commission. You are very wise in sorting these things out. I think it's probably good to begin with the expectation, as you put the position description out there, that the expectation is that it is a nonpartisan position. Anything in your background that could be raised against you and your nonpartisan standing should certainly be considered. But exactly the language you want to put out there, I leave it to you.
Thank you, Mr. Nobles. We appreciate the comments, and I think everybody's trying to achieve the same concern. Not knock anybody out, but make sure it's clear about what the expectation and the roles are. And somebody, if they see that it's very clear that, you know, yeah, they may pull themselves out, and I think that's just be a natural tendency. But I think we have to make it clear what the expectation is, and if it's recent and very distinct partisan activities, which will hinder the ability to consider them. I think it's good to make them aware up front. Representative Bernardi.
Thank you. I do have a question because I hear like anything, I hear the word anything in your past, or now I'm hearing recent activity. We may get candidates from other states and they have different registration rules for voting, and they may have to register as a party. And I think that's one of the issues that I see that Representative Liebling is raising that would disqualify someone that's very, very, very good candidate. And so I share that concern as well. So I think the wording is super important. But yes, we do have to have the expectation that they will be nonpartisan and that we can have confidence in them.
Thank you, Representative Bernardi. Representative Quam.
This specific thing about registration and etc. In Minnesota, sometimes there's a primary, and you have to, I know independents that have, when that comes up in one election, will designate as one party to vote in that primary decision and vice versa on the next election. I think that we have capabilities discerning, you know, that type of input. But frankly, we need to have the research if there's a broader partisan participation in it. And if we get down to a set of candidates and one has voted in a primary, you know, we should be able to have our own determination and discussion as a committee of what is rises above a certain level. and mincing words now is, I think, less of the effect than our thoughtful discussion on it later. But the main thing I want is that we are looking for a nonpartisan person, and that we do have the research for any background information. And then we, as a committee, can do the due diligence and pick the best candidates. And that's just my input. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Quam. Sen Rest?
Thank you. Again, I believe that that comment of saying that a nonpartisan background is essential is not it's not the same as saying any partisan activity will disqualify you. I think that the statement that's there is clear. It indicates a strong preference from the Legislative Audit Commission, and you know, if in a way, they're, even though they may have strong convictions, we also know that in the presidential primary, where you had to request either a Republican ballot or a DFL ballot, that many reporters chose not to participate, judges chose not to participate. I would imagine, I don't know this for sure, I would imagine Mr. Nobles did not participate. And, but that's not the same thing as, you know, as a high school student or a young college student attending a precinct caucus along the way. And then maybe deciding that they didn't like what they saw in either party, and they said a nonpartisan going forward is the role I'm going to I'm going to pursue, because I believe that that kind of public service is what I am able to contribute to the best. And I would like to know that going forward. And so I think saying it's essential doesn't mean it's exclusionary. But we would expect someone to say that, yes, at one time there was a partisan sign in front of their house that their son or daughter or their parents put up, and that would not exclude someone from our consideration. But a nonpartisan background for me is indeed essential. Thank you. And I don't mean to split hairs on it, but I think we need to be clear in our expectations of what kind of a background we are looking for. You know, and you can even go back to, well, the second one is 5 years direct experience. Well, what if somebody comes and is just excellent with 4? Well, if they make an application, they'll just have to justify that 4 years is good enough. And you know, you can do that with almost any one of these minimum qualifications. That can be explanations can be offered that would overcome the actual minimum qualification. So I would hope that we would leave the language the way it is, understanding that an explanation may indeed mitigate that the word essential. So thank you. I hope that we will keep the language as it is. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Excellent. Thank you, Senator Rust. And I think all the comments are excellent. You did a great summation of where we're at and kind of how that statement as it stands today. I think all the statements will be taken into consideration as we go out and refine this and get the process moving. We have done great work today. Again, thank you, Mr. Nobles, from all of us here as a part of the institution and every single Minnesotan. We appreciate your service. And so with that, everyone, I think that concludes our business, and we will end the call to the end of the Legislative Audit Commission meeting today. So we adjourn. Thank you, everybody.